Welcome to the Adorama Live Theater. This is WCBS's Conversations. I'm Peter Haskell with Westchester County Executive Rob Astorino. Rob, thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Peter.
Let's start with the news and what's happening in the news.
Nothing's happening. It's very quiet.
What are your impressions of the Trump administration in the early days?
Well, that's a biggie. They are doing what they said they were going to do, so it shouldn't be a complete surprise to people. You know, he's rolling out executive orders, and he talked about that in the campaign. Obviously, a judicial pick for the Supreme Court is not a surprise. There was a vacancy, and he said he was going to do that early. And so I think what we're seeing is a reaction to what he's doing. It's not a surprise, but it is a reaction on both sides. You know, Republicans or those who voted for Trump around the country are thankful he's doing what he said he was doing, and those on the other side that either voted for Hillary Clinton or opposed Donald Trump are, you know, reacting negatively. But I don't think it's, what I don't like is it is getting very, very, very loud and sometimes violent. We saw what happened at Berkeley's campus just for a speaker. And so that is where it gets dangerous, and that's where it gets beyond controversial.
So people want to protest?
No problem with that.
Okay, so...
No problem with that. But what I do have a problem is when these so-called protesters exercising their First Amendment rights to assembly or speech are then counterintuitively denying the rights of others for their own First Amendment rights of speech and assembly. And that is where I draw the line. You know, I'll defend anybody to say whatever they want, whether I agree with it or not, whether I think it's stupid or outrageous. That's your choice to do that. But you also need to defend my right to speak and others. And the First Amendment is there to do just that, to protect those people and the minority rights of a viewpoint. And so that's not happening these days. And that's a dangerous path that we're on right now.
You know, one of the things that's gotten a lot of attention is the president talking about crowd sizes and things like that.
That's stupid stuff.
Phony votes. And what is his point, and what are your impressions of how this unfolds and the reaction that it draws?
You know, I think some of these things are just distractions, and I don't think he should even be concerned about any of those kind of things. I think what he should be doing is the agenda that is going to benefit people, meaning the economy, you know, the regulations that have really just killed businesses over the last 8 years. Those are the kind of things that he's got to get back on track. And if he does, he'll be rewarded, personally and politically, but also the country will be rewarded, and that's what we should all be rooting for. We want jobs. We want good-paying jobs and wages. But the distractions, you know, arguing over whether his crowd was bigger than Obama's crowd, who cares? That's just stupid stuff.
So you've got this talk about either fake news or alternative facts, and it seems the question is this: does the truth matter?
It certainly does, and it should matter to all sides. And you know, just because somebody has a viewpoint that is contrary to someone else doesn't mean that the other person is lying. You know, there is plenty of room for opinion, but if something is, you know, 1 + 1 always has to equal 2. And unfortunately, and I've seen it in government, 1 + 1 could equal any number you want.
But does that serve the president's purposes?
It doesn't serve anyone's purposes. It shouldn't serve this president or the previous president or the next president. It shouldn't serve anyone's purposes. 1 + 1 should always equal 2.
And I'm also curious to get your take on civility or lack thereof. You got a Deputy Attorney General. She betrayed the Justice Department, picking on John McCain. You've heard all these things. What does that do to our conversation if there's no civility?
Well, there needs to be civility, but civility needs to be on both sides. I mean, I don't want this, and I don't think you're portraying it. It shouldn't be portrayed as there's only one side that's being uncivil. Right now, we've got just noise, loud noise, and it's spilled over into violence, and that can't happen. I have no problem with loudness. I have no problem with people speaking up on whatever issue. But we've got into points now. We saw it in Berkeley the other day. We've seen it in some of these other protests down in Washington for the inauguration, and I was there, where you have people, and quite frankly, you know, if you're going to go out and you're going to destroy property, if you're going to try to assault people or spit on people because of their political views, then you're an animal, as far as I'm concerned.
But my impression was those were professional protesters.
Yeah.
They were anarchists. They were not anti-Trump folks per se.
Well, they took the occasion to be anti-Trump.
Correct.
And to be anarchists, but they need to be denounced by both sides, that that's not acceptable behavior. You know, they were peaceful protests. The Women's March, for instance, on Saturday, the day after the inauguration, was a peaceful march. That's the right way to do things. The rally for life, the pro-life rally, peaceful. That's the right way to do things. But just because somebody has a Make America Great hat does not give you the right to go assault that person because you feel differently.
And in terms of civility, I'm curious, what do you tell your kids about this?
You know what? It's a learning lesson. I tell them that, unlike what some are saying, that the world is coming to an end, this is a learning lesson. This is part of democracy. I've always gone with, you know, you've got to be, thou shalt not sulk in defeat nor gloat in victory. That's how I kind of go through life. And I think that should be applied in all instances. You know, you're not going to win them all, you're not going to lose them all, and there's always another day. But we have a great process in this country. I took great offense to what John Lewis and 68 other Democrats did by not showing up at the inauguration. And I was very proud of the congressional representation in Westchester, all 3 Democrats, for going to the inauguration. And as they said, they may not agree with Donald Trump, but that day was not about Donald Trump or their party. That day was about America and the peaceful transition of power. And there'll be plenty of time to disagree and plenty of time to vote against them and plenty of time to fight. But that was not the day to do that. And I think that's where we're becoming a nation that is just completely torn apart, and there are no more rules. And, you know, we are a nation of laws. Those laws can be changed through the process. We've seen it through all different administrations. And to go beyond that is not what this country stands for. And that's where I talk about where we're getting into a dangerous zone as a nation.
This would be my last question on this subject, but in terms of the president, what is his responsibility to try to create this civil environment and allow dissent?
Oh, I think he is. I mean, he's not sending in combat troops to Berkeley or to places to say, you know,
but he's
stop
criticizing people who are objecting to what he's doing.
Well, but I think he's doing his agenda. Right or wrong, he's doing what he got elected to do. And that is going to spark protests, and you're going to have that kind of division. That's the process. I'm fine with that. And, you know, do I agree with his tweets at 3 in the morning or think? No, not necessarily. I really don't. But you know what? He has a job to do. The Congress has a job to do. And he's going to find that they're not always going to be compatible. And even with his own party, there's going to be areas of strong disagreement. And he's going to have to work through those. And I don't think, you know, just looking at his life, he's not used to that. You know, on Fifth Avenue, he was used to running his own business, and what he said goes. And the checks and balances that we have in a political system and a governmental system aren't necessarily what he was used to. He's going to learn that pretty quick when the Senate or the House, his party, are going to put the brakes on things. And you're going to see that happening.
So let's switch over to Westchester,
Sure.
which brings you here. Let's start with Indian Point.
Yeah.
The governor has plans to close that in 5 years or so. What is that going to mean for Westchester?
Well, I think what the governor did, and let's be brutally honest here, it was purely politics for the governor. And what he has done is he has taken all the good about Indian Point, the energy it produces, and it is 25% of Westchester and New York City's energy. He has taken the jobs, 1,000 directly employed at the plant, but then over 2,500 indirectly through contractors and businesses directly related to Indian Point. And he has taken the tax revenue that this company pays to not only Westchester, which is about $5 million all in, but to the town of Cortland, the village of Buchanan, half their budget, by the way, the school district, which is going to be absolutely devastated. So he's taken all of the good, and what he's left is all of the bad that we have to deal with, because the nuclear rods, the spent fuel rods, are going to be on site for about 6 decades. Which literally makes that property a wasteland. You're not going to repurpose that property, rezone that property right along the Hudson, by the way. So you're not going to put condos there. You're not going to put anything there. It's basically, for the most part, that 240 acres will probably remain dormant, which means that property is not taxable in the future. So the hardships are going to be there. We've got to learn our lessons from what happened in Shoreham and in other areas where plants have been decommissioned in the country. Now, for the governor, he gets to check a box. and he cut a deal very quietly with Entergy and with Riverkeeper. Didn't inform anybody. And, you know, we're left holding the bag, and the ratepayers, we already pay the highest, second highest rates in America. Hawaii is #1. This will absolutely allow us to leapfrog Hawaii and become numero uno, and that is not a good thing because, you know, if you're already struggling in the middle class to try to pay college tuition bills or to once in a while go on vacation or, you know, pay for sports equipment for your kids or whatever, you know, an extra $5 or $10 a month on your bill to some may not seem like a lot, but it is when you add everything else. So I think there's a big issue right now, and quite frankly, he kept saying that, and trust me, because we deal with it all the time, a speck of oil falls off the boiler at Indian Point, or a lug nut falls off a piece of equipment, and they're out there protesting that it is unsafe. When the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has consistently said, with the most inspections of any nuclear power plant in the United States, that it is their green rating, their highest safety. So is it old? Yes. Has it been brought up to date through the years? Yes. The argument that, you know, we shouldn't have a nuclear power plant because it is in a metropolitan area, well, we already do. One is 40 miles from Washington, D.C. We have them in Philadelphia, we have them in Chicago, we have them in Miami, because that's where people are. And, you know, we've got to make sure it's safe, and that's one of our biggest issues. And assuming it is, because the NRC says it is, you got to weigh the pros and cons. It is infinitesimally small that something would happen there. Infinitesimally small. Now we can say, oh, what if it did? We can do that.
That's got to cross your mind.
Well, but it crosses my mind when I cross the street. That if I look the wrong way, I'm going to get hit by a bus. You know, all the time we get on a plane. Is it going to crash? Is there going to be terrorism? I mean, the odds are infinitesimally small, but the rewards are worth it. And so that's what we weigh every day. Otherwise, we'd be at a standstill in life.
So what do you do to try to fill that budget hole?
Well, you know, we've got to worry about the taxes, the jobs, the energy. And you can't have a growing economy if you don't have the power. And so that is a big concern. And, you know, is there enough power in the rest of the region? Well, you've got transmission line issues. You've got lawsuits that are going to happen now on all the potential. He has said right now there is no replacement, but they'll work on it. Well, I think it should have been done the other way. Everything should have been in place, then shut down Indian Point, as opposed to a 4-year deadline with potential lawsuits and actions that'll delay this. And one of the things that I intend to do is to talk to Secretary Perry, because there is a rule under the Federal Power Act, Rule 202C, which gives the authority of the Secretary of Energy to make sure nuclear power plants or power plants stay on if there is a need. I don't know if we're going to ever get there. I want this on his radar, because if we are in a situation 3 or 4 years from now, or 5 or 6 years from now, where there is not enough electricity, where rates are going up, where we might have potential rolling blackouts, or the economy needs to build and there's not enough supply, then we've got to have that as an option. Doubtful it'll ever happen, but they need to know about it.
I want to move on to anchorages. There's been a proposal to establish...
in that same area.
43 anchorages on the Hudson River, 10 locations between Yonkers and Kingston. What does that mean for Westchester?
I think there's a lot of issues with this. First of all, the Coast Guard did not follow their own rules with regard to public notices and hearings, and the process is very important. Secondly, you know, we in Westchester, and I know that the other northern counties have worked very hard to reclaim the Hudson River, to not only make it a healthier river, but also to promote tourism and economic development along that. Now, you have to understand the size of what these anchorages would be. Basically, they would be large parking lots with an indefinite amount of time.
And let's just to be specific, this is about oil barges, right?
Oil barges, potentially other things as well. But they would be sitting there almost a mile out of the Hudson. From a mile out and in is that whole parking lot area where they could just sit indefinitely. And that concerns a lot of us, because you do have issues of tourism, you do have issues of environmental sensitivity, but you also have security issues, terrorism issues. You know, take nuclear power plant, okay, that's there, and that is a soft target, hard target, and that still will be there for a long time, even through a decommissioning period. But more than that, I mean, we don't want to set up an area where you could have these oil barges become targets. Having said that, we know commerce has to move up and down. It must. So what we want is a strong dialogue with the U.S. Coast Guard. We have already been put on the record the issues that we think are very important to Westchester. And I think that, will tell over time how this progresses, but we have been opposed to it.
Is it not contradictory to say, well, I'm not worried about Indian Point being targeted, but I am concerned about barges on the Hudson being targeted?
No, because you're just creating more opportunities for people that want to do ill will. I was never really concerned about Indian Point per se, because I've had the security briefings. I do know about that plant. I've been inside that plant many, many times. The redundancies are there. And there's for most people, they assume that if you shoot at it or a plane were to crash into the top, that it would be vulnerable. That's not the case. First of all, it is 6 foot wide, deep, concrete enforced dome. Even if you crack that, that's not where the vulnerabilities are. I'm not going to say where they are, but that's not where they are. And so they're very, very hard to get to. So this notion that, it could easily do harm is probably not right.
In terms of the plan for the anchorages, how do you fight this, and can you fight this, and how do you go about it?
Well, you can fight it in many ways. First of all, there are legal actions, because if they didn't follow their own rules and procedures, then that is an issue. Clearly, through the political process, the governmental process, and now that you have a new administration, you're also going to have new leadership at the Coast Guard, and we could appeal to them.
And so, do you have a suggestion for residents who say, wait a second, this is not right, what can I do?
I think, stay informed, let the Coast Guard know how you feel about this issue, be on record, and we certainly have been, from day one on this, out in front, because it does affect Yonkers, it does affect northern Westchester, it really affects the entire coastline of the Hudson River in Westchester, but then, as you mentioned too, it goes north as well.
Moving on to gun shows. You recently had a gun show at the Westchester County Center. The legislature didn't like the idea. You did. Why does Westchester need a gun show?
Why doesn't it? Let me turn that around for a second. We had a gun show at the county center for many, many years. And there are people who dislike the idea of guns. And believe me, I've gotten some kinds of emails and letters that bordered from angry and irrational to really opinionated and respectful. And on the other side, too, that how dare there not be a gun show. Now, I just want to talk for a second about what it is and what it isn't, because there's a big misconception of what a gun show permits and what it doesn't permit. You cannot walk off the street, go into the county center or wherever there's a gun show, just like in a gun store, and say, I'm going to buy that gun. Now, you can say, that's the gun I'd like to purchase, and they're going to say, okay, you will go through an instant background check on site through ATF and through the FBI. Then you have to show your pistol permit. Then you have to get the model number of the gun you want to purchase, and then go amend your to the county clerk, amend your license, which takes a week or two. Then you can go pick up your gun at the gun store where it was purchased. You cannot walk out with a handgun. Now, can you walk out with a rifle? You can, but you could also go to Dick's Sporting Goods. But in both instances, both places, you have to go through a background check. We adopted a couple years ago when we brought the show back. First thing I was asked was, can we bring this gun show back? I said, well, let me find out. Went to law enforcement, were there ever any issues? The answer was no. Went to the Parks and Rec, ever any issues? They said, no, it's one of the best attended we ever have, and it makes the most money for us. So the previous county executive had stopped it for political reasons. That was his right, just as it is my right to bring it back for the facts that I went through. There were some who said, well, if the legislature voted against it, then you need to abide by that. Wait a minute. We have a checks and balances system. The legislature was split 9-8. And so I looked at the statistics, I looked at the facts. It would also, that complete ban that the Democrats wanted on county property and throughout Westchester, would have absolutely set up First Amendment, Second Amendment, and Commerce Clause issues that we would have lost in federal court. So I had to look at this issue, not emotionally, I had to look at this issue based on facts. And that was my veto. And I'd ask anyone to go to westchestergov.com and read the veto. It's 2 pages, but it's based on facts. Do you know how many guns are used from gun shows, purchased at gun shows and crimes? Almost none. In fact, the FBI has dropped it as the statistics. So I think when people understand what it is and what it isn't, most of the 350 tables at the gun show are for collectibles. Civil War, World War II, Revolutionary War. They sell beef jerky, they sell hot sauces. It's not simply guns. In fact, most people don't even buy a gun at a gun show. They peruse, just like I might go to Macy's and look at something, feel something, try it on. Maybe I'll get a better price on Amazon and have it shipped to the house. That's really what happens at these places.
There is a new Tappan Zee Bridge that is going to be opening, 2017 one direction, 2018 the other direction. 2 things. What does that mean for Westchester, and what do you think is going to happen with the tolls?
I think it's a good thing. I give the governor a lot of credit for pushing this project through, and it's something that I've supported. In fact, when I first got into office in 2010, it was one of the things I was pushing. So I think the idea that these bridges are being built, that the old Tappan Zee will come down, that's a good thing. It is a real important artery for not just the Hudson Valley, but really the Northeast. The issue now is, how is he going to pay for this? Because he has never said how he's going to pay for it, because quite frankly, the money is not there. And the bigger problem is the comptroller has said, beginning next year, and looking ahead the next 5 years, there's going to be massive multi-billion-dollar deficits that the state has. The loan that they got from the federal government is only about half, and so where are they going to come up with it? The other day, the Thruway Authority said that there will absolutely be increases in the tolls, but they can't say how much. It's not that they can't say, they don't want to say, because that number had to be put in there, what their projections were for the toll increases, for revenue income in their loan to the federal government. So they're holding that back because for political reasons, he doesn't want to announce that till after next year's election.
What do you think's going to happen?
The math doesn't add up. You can't have a $5 toll to pay off those kind of bonds. And so, the projections that we've heard are probably in the $10 range, maybe higher.
And do you think they should have lower rates for Westchester and Rockland residents?
I do, and we've seen that in Staten Island and in Queens for various bridges, so they do have those. I do think that that would be important because people who live here are already getting highly taxed. They're already paying for a bridge that they need to get over to go to work. So I do think that that should be an option for residency.
What are the top priorities that you're looking at now?
In Westchester?
Yes.
Well, there's a whole bunch of things right now. We've got Playland, which we have a private company taking in and going to remodel Playland and make it terrific. That's something that the county has lost money on for many years. We, as a government, are inefficient to do it the right way, and so we turned it over to a private company, partnering, so those things are progressing. We have a development in Valhalla, Hawthorne area, where Grasslands, where Westchester Medical Center is. That's 60 acres. That's going to be developed. Private company, over $1 billion in development, over $15 million a year in rent and taxes coming to the county. It'll be about 12,000 jobs, and really it'll be a biotech village. Very complementary to the medical center, to New York Medical College, to Blythedale Children's Hospital, to the Ferrari Children's Hospital. Research and development. Regeneron, which is very close, which is now the 5th largest biotechnology company, pharmaceutical company in the world. So that'll be really great. The other thing is we're looking at skating rinks at the Kensico Dam, permanent skating rinks, which would make that a year-round facility, and so in the winter months you could have, like Bryant Park, a village, temporary village with food and rinks. The big rink in the middle would be regulation-size hockey, and then 2 big circular ones on the side connected by a 30-foot wide lane. So you'd have free skating and lessons, and we could partner with the Rangers and do a lot of great things. So those are some of the big projects, including also privatizing Westchester County Airport, which has been done successfully in Puerto Rico. We would be able to take the money that's captured at the airport, which legally we can't use other than at the airport. This would allow us under this FAA program from President Clinton, and move it and use it for law enforcement, for our parks, for general purposes. And the airport would get the needed service that it really requires these days. We would balance the environmental issues. We put them into the lease, so you can't build a longer runway. You can't build a new terminal. There are a lot of things you can't do. It's going to stay basically the same with upgrades. And that's a good deal. That's $140 million coming to the county in a long-term annuity, if you will. And so these are the kind of things that we can do to bring in new revenue that does not require tax increases. We've gone 7 straight years without a tax increase. The budget today is a little less than when I walked in the door. So we're really working hard to make sure the taxpayer who is already beleaguered is not going to get pinched or bleed more.
Last question for you. You've mentioned Governor Cuomo a few times. You ran against him. He defeated you. Is that something you'll take on again?
I don't know. I mean, look, I'm on the ballot this year in Westchester. And if the voters give me a third and final term, next year I'll just take a look at the landscape. I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that the governor can do to help or hurt Westchester. I think in many ways he's been hurting because the property taxes by the schools and the communities are really getting a pinch because of his mandates. He's refusing to cut things that the state should be doing, forcing the county, forcing the municipalities and the schools to pay their bills. And you know, and you look at the ethics and you look at the state and the direction it's going, it's not well. Most people don't think it's going in the right direction. So I have no idea what the landscape will be next year. I'll keep the options open. I think I should. We ran a good race. You know, we got a lot closer than anyone thought. The governor in a 2-to-1 Democratic state, at apparently the height of his popularity 3 years ago, only got 53% of the vote statewide. That's not something I'm sure he's happy about. But who knows?
Some suggest he's moved to the left a little bit. Does that make him more vulnerable? Does that make it easier for a Republican?
Well, I think what he's doing is clearly he's running for president in 2020 at the expense of New Yorkers. And when he puts his own political agenda above the needs of the people he serves, that's when you have issues that come to the fore that people start thinking about. That's when you have more people leave. New York, unfortunately, leads the nation in out-migration. We now have a smaller population. We have less people today than 10 years ago. And they're leaving. They're going to Florida, they're going to Texas, they're going to the Carolinas because there's more jobs, lower cost of living, less taxes, you know, all the good stuff. We have all the bad stuff here with the high tax. Now, New York City is doing pretty good because it's very resilient. But you look at the other areas, and especially upstate, it's not doing well at all. It's suffering. And he seemingly doesn't care. And I think he's just kind of running out of ideas at this point. So that's why he's going far left. And these far left ideas cost a lot of money. Some are very well intentioned, but they cost a lot of money. And there's nothing free. The middle class knows that now. There's no such thing as anything free. The free means somebody pays, and oftentimes it's not the, quote, rich, it's the middle class.
Westchester County Executive Rob Astorino, thanks for
Good to
coming
see you,
in.
Peter. Thank you very much.
I'm Peter Haskell. Thanks for joining us.